Alright, we need to talk. Even though season 4 of The Boys dropped last year, the discourse around it hasn't really died down. If anything, it's gotten louder. Depending on where you look online, you'll see people saying the show's gone off the rails, that it's too political now, that it's lost its bite, or that it's just spinning its wheels setting up the finale. So I figured, alright, let's break this down, because this isn't just a case of some people liked it, some people didn't. There are actually a few distinct camps forming in the fanbase, each with their own reasons for being frustrated or satisfied with season 4. So let's talk about it in today's video. So today we're going to look at 3 distinct groups of viewers who had strong opinions about this season. Am I oversimplifying a fan base of people with their own subjective opinions into 3 groups to make it easier to understand for our video's sake? Yeah, I am. But you, the viewer, could say, I don't think any of this, and that's entirely fine. Heck, let me know what you thought about the last season in the comments. I'd love to know. But continuing on, we're going to cover the ones who think the show went too political, the ones who just didn't like the writing, and the ones who enjoyed the writing but felt like the whole series was just a setup for the finale. Okay, let's talk about the first group. The people who think that The Boys has gotten too political or woke. Okay, so this isn't exactly new. The Boys has always had a political bent to it. It's baked into its DNA. Vought is basically an evil version of corporate America. Homelander is a walking metaphor for authoritarianism mixed with a social media obsession. A lot of characters are stand-ins for certain groups of people. It's all over the show. But this season, that metaphor got a little louder, and some people weren't into it, to put it mildly. A lot of complaints come from the scenes that mirrored real-world political tensions, a little too closely for some viewers. Whether it was Homelander's rallies echoing a certain political figure's playbook, or the show digging deeper into online radicalization and media manipulation. It clearly hit a nerve, and now for longtime fans, this stuff isn't new. The comics were even more blunt about the political influences of the era it was written in. In one sequence, it had Vought sending out a team of heroes to stop hijackers on 9/11, but they screwed that up pretty bad. The moment was meant to shock, but also that in the comic that the heroes that Vought wanted to move into the military so bad would screw up under any bit of real pressure. So this isn't exactly new. But for this particular group, season 4 felt like the writers were preaching instead of telling a story. And once you feel like the show is telling you how to think, it's really hard to stay immersed. So of course they fought back against it and ruined the Rotten Tomatoes score. Don't believe me? Look into the audience score and look at the reviews. A lot of the 1-star reviews, you can see exactly where their grievances lie with the show. And I get it, shows should be about immersion, and shows like Andor take a look at fascism, but the main difference between The Boys and Andor is how subtle the messaging is. That being said, the show wears the fact that it's a piece of satire proudly on its sleeve, and considering real-world events, it naturally leads into The Boys adapting some of that to really strike a nerve at the audience. That's the point of the show. If you didn't know that it was making fun of that from the first place, that's on you. Now let's talk about the second group, the folks who just didn't like the writing. Not because of politics, but because they felt that the season was either sloppy, inconsistent, or just boring. A lot of criticism here was aimed at the pacing. Some say it dragged in the middle, others pointed to characters making decisions that didn't really feel earned or was just flat out weird. There were also some complaints about the tonal whiplash. One moment you're getting some heavily dramatic character moment, and the next it's a gory joke or some wild sex gag. This group isn't saying that the show lost its edge, it's saying that it's lost the balance. The tension that used to come from feeling like anything could happen kinda gave way to what some felt were cheap shocks or over-explained plot twists. A few longtime fans also said that characters like the Frenchie side plot was a bit weird, or that Huey being assaulted twice in the season was distasteful. I get it, and those are actually valid criticisms of the show, but I'll cover a little bit more of that later. And that brings us to the third group, the people who actually liked the writing, but still walked away from season 4 feeling like it was just one long setup for the final season. This group is interesting because they're not mad, they're just a little underwhelmed. They recognize that the show is trying to lay a ton of groundwork for season 5, especially with the rise of Homelander in the White House. Butcher striking it out alone and all the other members of the Boys getting arrested or going to hiding. We all saw that in the season finale. It's kind of like being promised a fireworks show and then spending 45 minutes watching people set up the launchers. There's a sense that the real show is coming later, but it made this season feel like it was spinning its wheels. There is a meme online where the last 2 seasons of The Boys had got them close to ending Homelander, only for him to get away in time and not immediately retaliate. But then again, if they just had that happen, there wouldn't be a show. And if you're gonna spend an entire season setting the stage, every character beat has to kinda land. Every subplot has to feel like it's building building momentum, but now to be fair, all three groups are reacting to a show that's still taking big swings. The Boys has never really played it safe, and in a lot of ways, the fact that it's sparking this kind of discussion is a sign that it's still doing what it set out to do: make people uncomfortable, and make them talk about the show, and make them laugh at stuff they probably shouldn't really be laughing at. But the big question now is this: can Season 5 bring all this together? Eric Kripke himself has talked about the pressure of the 5th season being the last one and trying to really stick the landing. Now for my own personal take, I enjoyed Season 4. Did it have some kind of slow moments? Yeah, very obviously this season had a lot of ground to cover, especially considering what next season is pointing to. But personally, I think that people calling this season trash are being disingenuous about it. When writing a show like this, certain pieces have to be moved into the right direction. Some shows do it masterfully, like Breaking Bad, and some shows botch the landing entirely and ruin the whole thing, like Game of Thrones, specifically the last couple of seasons. The Boys is somewhere in the middle, where it's taking care of its own story, but clearly there was some story bits that needed more ironing out. I'm specifically talking about the slow moments in this season, not the political stuff, just to be clear. The Boys is doing a great job with the material that it has. I think it would have turned out differently in the hands of a team who didn't really care. It would have ended up as a nothing burger that would have been cancelled midway during season 2, but there's a reason why the show is so popular on top of its writing and the fantastic performances from the cast. Just be amazed that in this era of TV, something like this is going out on its own terms. And that's pretty much all I have to say on that. But before I go, I wanted to answer a mailbag question. If you have your own questions you want answered, leave a comment down below with the hashtag mailbag, and we'll answer them in a future video. This one comes to us from @MarcoTorres1, hashtag mailbag. What do you think the story of Invincible Season 4 will be like? Thank you for the question, Marco. So the funny thing about Invincible, instead of something like The Boys, is that with The Boys, there's a comic, but the show largely goes its own path while taking some inspiration from the comic. For the case of Invincible, though, it's very one-for-one with the book, and the story is already finished, which is why I usually have to put a spoiler warning on videos for show watchers only. So yeah, it's much more difficult to cover something like Invincible where their room to theorize is minimal. So when you ask me what is the story going to be like, I already know the answer. And to answer your question a little bit more directly, it's going to be really, really awesome, and I'm excited to see it be put into animated form. But if you yourself are curious, the show leaves off around issue 65 in the comics. I highly recommend giving a read through, but if you wanted to just find out what happens and you're impatient, there you go. I think that this season will cover issues 66 through 79, but that's a rough guess. There is a little bit of room to theorize. They're putting in a story featuring Damien Darkblood that wasn't included in the comics, so at least that's new stuff. If there's any other comic readers in the comments that want to take a guess at it, let me know. But that just about wraps it up for this video. Thank you, Marco, for your mailbag question, and we'll see you guys next time.